The movie begins with a depiction of Earth in crisis due to environmental degradation and overpopulation. In response, scientists and leaders decide to embark on a multi-generational mission to colonize a distant exoplanet. A woman describes a planet that humans could potentially colonize. She proposes sending a scouting expedition since the journey will take 86 years. The crew would reproduce aboard the ship. The mission's crew is genetically engineered on Earth. A man, Richard, explains why the crew is specially designed for this mission. Children raised and trained solely for this purpose. They must determine when the crew will be ready to depart. Younger members mean longer resource preservation, but Richard worries they might not be fully prepared for space travel alone. Richard visits the facility where the children are raised, wearing full protective gear. The children are overjoyed to see him. He assesses their progress and tucks Christopher, Sela, and Zach into bed. The next day, Richard argues with the mission's leader that he should accompany the children to protect them, allowing the mission to launch in 4 years instead of 7. The mission launches with Richard leading. The shuttle docks with Humanitas, the main ship. The crew settles in and Richard takes one final look at Earth. A decade later, the once children are now adults, beginning their routines aboard the ship. Their first lesson covers fertilization for the second generation, starting in their 24th year. The crew moves robotically, consuming a blue liquid. Sela confides in Richard about feeling meaningless, and he consoles her. That night, Christopher struggles to sleep and the next day, he and Richard encounter a water toxicity warning in the hydroponics bay. Suspecting a chemical not filtered from their urine, Christopher investigates further, discovering the truth. The chemical in the blue liquid dulls their senses, making them docile to prevent natural reproduction and overpopulation. Christopher and Zach decide to stop consuming the liquid and share their findings with Kai and Julie, revealing information about a hidden compartment on the ship. The chemical is present in the blue liquid they drink. Initially believed to aid digestion, they discover it has a more sinister purpose. It dulls their senses and makes them docile, suppressing their desires and pleasure responses to prevent natural reproduction and overpopulation. In a later session with Richard, Christopher confronts him, accusing him of lying, but only mentioning the unmarked compartment, Pod 23. Richard defends the mission, suggesting there must be a reason for the secrecy, hinting that the pod might be intended for the third generation. After the session, Richard sends a message to Earth, asking for permission to be transparent with the crew to maintain their trust. The response will take some time to arrive. The next day, Christopher finds himself fantasizing about Sela while standing in line. During lunch, he keeps glancing at her, but Zach comments on her change. Richard intervenes, reminding Zach of the rules. In the gym, Christopher and Zach get into a fight, confusing the other crew members. Both are feeling the effects of not taking the drug. They hear unfamiliar noises and discuss the possibility of an alien life form in the observation room with another crew member. In Richard's office, he shows Sela some dried plants from Earth. Zach and Christopher overhear and approach the room. Zach becomes jealous when he sees Richard touching Sela's shoulder. Soon after, they lose contact with Earth, and Richard decides to fix the transmitter, taking Zach along. Zach inappropriately touches Sela, but Richard intervenes and pulls Zach away. Zach runs off, and Phoebe informs Richard that Zach has stopped drinking the blue liquid. Richard finds Christopher, who admits he has also stopped taking the drug. They argue, but Richard explains the drug was necessary to prevent behavior like Zach's. He asks Christopher to help fix the transmitter and promises to support him in voicing objections to mission control once communication is restored. Richard and Christopher prepare for a spacewalk. As they exit the ship, Christopher experiences new sensations, and Richard keeps a close watch on him while repairing the transmitter. Inside the ship, unsettling noises are heard again, causing the crew to become anxious. They check the external monitors and suddenly, something appears next to Richard and Christopher. The entity injures Richard, flinging him away from the ship. Concurrently, the ship experiences a malfunction. Chaos ensues as a fire breaks out in the system's room. Christopher brings Richard back inside, and they rush him to the medical bay. Despite their efforts, the medical team, led by Sela, is unable to revive Richard and she declares him dead. The crew convenes to discuss the incident. They mention the strange creaking sounds and one member reports seeing something on the monitor that seemed to attack Richard, suggesting it was alien. Phoebe breaks down in tears, and Christopher reassures the crew, urging them to stay strong. The surveillance footage was destroyed by the fire in the system's room. The crew needs to select a new chief officer. Zach nominates himself, but the others insist on an election. Christopher is chosen as the new chief officer, much to Zach's chagrin, though he offers his congratulations. Christopher's first task is to repair the transmitter and oversee other repairs caused by the fire. The surveillance system is last, as they hope the drives are intact to understand what happened to Richard. Later, Sela visits Richard's office, looking through his photos and videos. Christopher finds her there, and she admits she is supposed to destroy Richard's archive but is reluctant. They watch Richard's video diary, showing his belief in the mission and care for the crew. Christopher finds the crew in the cantina, not at their posts. Zach explains they are fixing the refrigerators to prevent food spoilage and suggests a feast to celebrate their new chief officer. During the meal, Kai urges everyone to stop drinking the blue liquid, and the crew collectively dumps it. Meanwhile, Sela and Christopher enjoy Richard's videos together. Zach, attracted to Julie, initiates physical contact, which she reciprocates while the others watch. Later, the crew is playfully running around the ship and exploring Richard's archive. When Sela finds them in his quarters and tries to send them away, they resist. Zach is the last to leave, taunting Sela that Richard is no longer there to protect her. Alarmed, Sela retrieves a scalpel from the medbay. Christopher, concerned about Zach's intentions, follows him and reaches the medbay first. When Zach arrives, Christopher pretends he and Sela are intimate, prompting Zach to leave. Sela threatens Christopher with the scalpel. Once he assures her he's there to help, she urges him to help the rest of the crew, who are becoming unruly. Christopher confronts Zach, warning him to stay away from Sela. As they hear the strange crackling noise again, Christopher follows it around the ship, joined by others who also hear it. Kai, seeing Julie close to another crew member, becomes enraged and attacks him. In the cantina later, Christopher tries to restore order, but the crew resists. A crew member Kai had beaten earlier retaliates with a tool, forcing Christopher to intervene physically. He instructs the crew to get medical attention for the injured and then convene in the common room. During the meeting, he insisted that the fighting must stop and repairs must continue for the sake of their descendants. Zach challenges Christopher's authority, leading to a heated debate. Some crew members express fear of working in the systems room, believing an alien presence caused Richard's death. Phoebe suggests repairing the surveillance system to uncover the truth, but Zach dismisses her and undermines Christopher. Declaring he no longer cares about the rules, Zach attempts to rally the crew, arguing he should lead and form a group strong enough to combat any alien threat. Many crew members join Zach, while others remain loyal to Christopher and head to the surveillance room to fix the system, wary of the potential alien presence. Christopher cautiously enters the systems room first, checking for dangers. Meanwhile, Zach and his group reach the same room. Unaware of Christopher's presence, Zach and Kai venture deeper inside, searching for the supposed alien. A commotion ensues, and Zach and Kai emerge terrified, falsely claiming they were attacked by an alien. In the medbay, Christopher hands the surveillance drive to Sela. They review the footage and discover Zach and Kai electrocuted Richard and fabricated the alien story. They decide to keep this information hidden until they can decide on a course of action. Christopher and Sela stash the drive in her room, discussing Zach's dangerous behavior. Christopher fears that without the drug, everyone might revert to violent tendencies, but Sela reassures him. They kiss and spend the night together. The next morning, Zach bangs on Sela's door, insisting on entry. He and Kai invite them to another celebration in the cantina. Christopher's group arrives to find the others already eating. During the meal, Zach declares himself the new chief officer. Christopher counters by playing the surveillance footage, exposing Zach's lie about the alien and his role in Richard's death. He demands Zach confine himself until they can determine the next steps. Chaos ensues as Zach confesses, but twists his story, claiming he killed Richard to protect them from an alien that Christopher supposedly brought inside. He manipulates the crew into believing the alien is hiding among them, inciting paranoia and violence. The crew turns on a medbay worker, suspecting him of being the alien. Despite Christopher's efforts, Kai strikes first, and the others join in, brutally beating the crewman to death. Christopher leads his group to a secure area while Zach's group arms themselves in the medbay. Christopher's group debates their next move. Some suggest surrendering and biding their time to overthrow Zach later. Sela reminds Christopher of the hidden weapons aboard the ship. Determined, Christopher searches for the secret compartment containing the weapons. He finds it and begins to open it, triggering an alarm. Julie and another crew member overhear the alarm and inform Zach. As Christopher retrieves tools to open the compartment, Zach's group arrives and starts dismantling the compartments. They uncover the hidden weapons. Kai suggests the weapons were meant for the third generation, but Zach insists they are meant for them now, escalating the tension and conflict further. Two members of Christopher's group join Zach's faction, revealing their hiding place. Sela, Phoebe and Christopher quickly devise a plan to approach Zach. Christopher suggests killing him, but Phoebe objects. Monitoring the situation, Sela sees Zach's group moving towards them. They cut the power and storm the room, capturing Sela's group. Sela convinces them to let her speak to Zach privately. Sela claims she wants to join Zach, but he mocks her and rejects the offer. Phoebe appeals to their humanity, but Kai kills her, shocking everyone. Seizing the chaos, Christopher and Sela escape but are pursued throughout the ship. They hide in a vent, but Zach's men quickly locate them. Zach fires into the vent, damaging their food supply, but they evade capture again. In desperation, Christopher uses a fire extinguisher to incapacitate an attacker, accidentally killing him. Zach catches up, firing as they flee. They find refuge in an airlock, where Christopher instructs Sela to don a spacesuit. Zack fires and is sucked into space as the hatch opens. He struggles with Sella, stabbing her before Christopher pushes him out. Christopher is also sucked out, but Sella kicks Zack out before he can close the hatch. Sella watches for Christopher, who eventually grabs onto the ship. They return inside and inform the crew that Zack is gone. Relieved, the crew lays down their weapons. Later, they gather for a meal in the cantina. Sella asks Christopher how they can prevent such events from recurring. They listen to Richard's recordings, emphasizing perseverance and humanity's worth. The crew votes for a new chief, electing Sella. In her diary, Sella commits to democratic decision-making and rejects returning to the blue liquid. The crew continues repairs and works in harmony. Over time, Sella becomes visibly pregnant with Christopher's child. The baby is born and a few years later, runs around the ship with other children. As the first generation ages, the ship approaches its destination. 86 years after the mission began, Humanitas prepares to land on the new planet. The movie concludes with everyone gathered to look at their new home. With that, the movie ends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching. See you next time.